Okay, this is chapter 1, and this is part 1 of chapter 1, and we are going to be going over science, different parts in your book. There are questions embedded in this video, so if you do not do the questions, then you will not be able to move on. So make sure you stick around and pay attention. There's going to be, for chapter 1, there's actually going to be 40 questions. It's a really large chapter because this book, this Cambell book, does a very poor job of discussing science itself. This is a book for majors, and so I've taken out a lot of stuff from the lecture. I've taken out a lot of key terms that you don't have to worry about, but because of that, it kind of assumes you already know what science is. And so I've added some things to the end of this lecture. So just be prepared for that. And my technology is not working. There we go. So, lemurs. Right? This is a lemur, big eyes, fuzzy primate. Right? They have tails, dark eye patches, and they're on Madagascar, which kind of broke off and they differentiated from their other primate ancestors. And here you can see a group of them, and this is just kind of the intro that you will find in your book, a little bit about lemurs. But we are going to talk about these 4 things. Themes of biology. We're going to talk about evolution, the core theme of biology. This is not the evolution chapters, but we're just going to briefly go over it. We'll get heavy into evolution at the end of the semester. The process of science and everyday life. So those are kind of the big ideas. This first part is only going to be the themes and the study of biology. So just realize that the next parts will cover those next bits. So themes in the study of biology. So life. What is life? How do we define life? If biology is the study of life, bio, life, ology, study of, then you think we would have a pretty good idea of what life is. And life, what is alive, seems very intuitive to most people, and it is. However, it is definitely not clear-cut. So let's kind of discuss a few of these things, and as we go through and see kind of what is life. So first part, order, some sort of order. And we have this sunflower here, and this sunflower is really interesting. And an interesting part of this sunflower here is that the flower is this little bit right here. There are lots and lots of little flowers. That's a flower, this is a flower, this is a flower, this is a flower, all throughout there. These are modified leaves. They are not petals. The petals are actually in here and around the flower. But there's some sort of order, some sort of organization for it to be functional. And so we like to look at that and say, well, it must be alive in order to perform that. But, well, there's also order in non-living things as well. And so we see natural forces, and natural forces work on living things as well as non-living things, and order comes about it. So, but one aspect of life is order. Another is reproduction. It's reproducing. So if we see something, and in fact in biology we like to define things by how they reproduce very often. So reproduction is a part growing in population. Growth and development. If we look at crystals grow, and you can consider it a type of development, but they're not alive. So growth and development in and of itself isn't a good measure, just like the other order and reproduction in and of themselves are not either. So energy processing, some sort of metabolism. We got a bear eating a fish, some sort of trout or salmon going on there, and he's gaining energy When we talk about order, right back here, how do things maintain order? Why don't they degrade? Well, because we're constantly intaking energy. This is an intake of energy, and that energy helps keep that order. So, and when we discuss thermodynamics, we'll get more into that, how things can, through the process of intaking energy and outputting energy, maintain high order. 5 is some sort of response to the environment, some sort of sensory system. 6, regulation. Okay, we talk about homeostasis. Homeo meaning same, stasis, status, keeping the same status. We like to keep our body temperatures 98.6 degrees. We like to keep our pH within a certain meter, and so we have this sort of regulation that goes on. But why we often are able to maintain our own body temperatures, things like reptiles or snakes, lizards, they are not. They are what they're called exothermic, and they use the sun to regulate. So they still have regulation going on, but they're just not doing it themselves. And evolutionary adaptation. Okay, so in this you see that it kind of looks like the leaf, and it's an adaptation, in this case, not to be eaten. So when you look at life, it kind of breaks down to eating as much as you can, not being eaten, and reproducing as much as you can. Those are kind of the big deals. You wake up, if you're an animal, you got to find food, and you got to not be food, and you got to reproduce. So those are common properties that life shares. Now, some life does not share all of them. Some only share a few. And so we have to be very careful. For example, if we look at certain bacteria, so chlamydia is an obligate intracellular organism, so it can't grow and develop outside of another cell. So is it not alive? Well, obviously it's alive. It's an STD that you can contract. So not all life share all of these, but they all share some sort of parts. And if you want further discussion, just Google "Are viruses alive?" and take a peek at that and see the big discussion on whether viruses are alive or not. So while life seems very intuitive, it is not intuitive. Right, so this is part 2, 1.2. In the hierarchy of life, there's some sort of organization, and so we kind of look at things at different levels, and we see what are emergent properties at each level. So let's start right down here with the atom. And my pen just went nuts. So give me a second. And sorry, my pen's not working. So we'll just leave it. Okay. So we start with an atom. You put a bunch of atoms together and you get a molecule. Okay. You put a bunch of molecules together, and when it comes to living things, you can get organelles. Organelles are membrane bound inside of a cell. So like mitochondria is an organelle, and the Golgi apparatus, those are organelles. But you put them all together and you get a cell. So here we have a neuron, and here's a nucleus, and there's synapses, and this is kind of what you use to move your muscles, to think, all that. And then when you put a whole bunch of cells together, you get a tissue. So you get lots of nervous tissue in the brain and things like that. Then when you put so here's the brain, and then when you put those organs together, you get an organ or an organ system. In this case, it's working through the nervous system. And then when you put a bunch of organ systems together, you get an organism. Then when you put a bunch of organisms together, so all of the same type, in this case the ring-tailed lemur, so you get a whole bunch of these lemurs together and they're called a population. Put a whole bunch of different populations together and you get a community. So in this case you got the lemur here and you got plants and all sorts of different plants, and there's insects in there and all sorts of that. And then you put different communities together, you get an ecosystem. And you put all the ecosystems together and you get a biosphere. So that's kind of the hierarchy. The whole Earth is a biosphere. It is all connected in certain ways. But then you start to break it down. So different ecosystems, desert ecosystems, rainforest ecosystems, forest ecosystems, Mediterranean climate style ecosystems. And then in each one of those you have different communities. So you have mangrove communities that consist of different animals and plants, but they're all part of a wetland ecosystem. You take all the fish, certain type of fish in that mangrove, and you get your populations. And you pull one individual out, it is an organism, and it's going to have organ systems, hearts, lungs, things like that. Then each one of those is made up of tissues. Those tissues are made up of cells. Those cells have organelles. They're made up of molecules all the way down to the atom. So in each step you get emergent properties. And emergent properties are just things that happen from the interactions that occur in each step. So you get different behaviors in a population than you do in a community. In a population, if it's just a population of single one type of organism, you're not going to get the same behaviors as if you mix it with lots of different plants and other animals, predators, prey, that kind of thing. So you get emergent properties in each one of these. So cells. Let's look at two different types, and you will be tested. Well, you'll be tested on those other things as well, but you should know the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. In fact, you should probably make a chart to help you with the test. Prokaryotic were the first to evolve. They're simpler. They're usually smaller. They do not have a membrane-bound nucleus. They are membrane-bound cells, but they do not have a membrane-bound nucleus. So eukaryotic cells, this is important, contain membrane-enclosed organelles. So we'll get into more different parts of the cell, and hopefully it'll make a little more sense there. But the cell has organelles and they have membranes around them. Eukaryotic cells are found in plants, animals, and fungi. They're also found in the protist family that's not here, and we'll talk a bit about that. So each individual cell has kind of those individual properties of life. And so cell theory, something called cell theory, says all living things are made up of cells. And that's been tested over and over and over again, and it's never been shown to be false. It's never been falsified so far. And each cell is kind of each individual life. So an important thing about cells is they use DNA as their genetic information. Think of DNA as kind of a recipe book. And so you have this recipe book for chocolate chip cookies. And it tells you how much of this, how much of that, when to do this and when to do that. And DNA is kind of the genetic information to kind of build those cookies. It's that recipe. And we have recipe for brown hair, recipe for blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, all sorts of different things. And so it's kind of recipe information. So here are eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells. So in the eukaryotic cells, you see membrane-bound organelles. You see a membrane-enclosed nucleus. On the prokaryotic cell, you see there is no nucleus, but it does have an outer membrane, but no membrane-bound organelles. The eukaryotic cell is much larger than the prokaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cells are bacteria or archaea. And so each one of these cells is going to interact with the environment, and it's going to exchange matter and energy. And so think of it this way, and you should probably write this down. Energy flows like nutrients cycle. So energy flows, nutrients cycle. So energy flows, nutrients cycle through, and this is kind of what pushes life. So vast majority of energy, with a little exception, comes from sunlight. And so sunlight is energy that drives everything. When you think of the gas you put in the car, that energy initially came from the sun. The sun grew the ferns that were then fossilized and then created oil. Or the sun grew the plants that grew that allowed the animals to eat it, that then decomposed. Whatever it is, the sunlight is what initially supplied the energy. So we have plants. They capture sunlight as energy, and this is really cool and really good for us, because without plants we could not survive. And so the plants capture sunlight energy, and very little of it actually, 1% or something like that. And then animals eat the plants, and we only get 1% of the energy there. It's the percentages. When we get to ecology, I'll give you the exact percentages. But I'm doing this to kind of just give you an idea. We catch very, very little of the sunlight, and then animals that eat the plants get very, very little energy from that, as opposed to how much actual energy is there. So once that energy, the sunlight, the plants turn that energy into a chemical type of energy. So those chemicals are made up of atoms, molecules, and those molecules, there's nutrients, and it cycles all the way through. And we give off some of that cycling as heat. So think of it this way. What you are breathing out, the carbon dioxide, we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. So the carbon that you're breathing out right now came from the breakfast you ate, or lunch you ate, or dinner you ate, just ate. Whatever it was, came from the food that you just got. That's where the carbon is going. That's what you're breathing out, is carbon from that food that you just had, that chemical energy. So that carbon, and if you follow the carbon around, it could have been stuck in limestone, stuck in fossil fuels. It could have been absorbed into water, or anything like that. But eventually it gets into the air and gets into plants, and then an animal may eat the plant and it may decompose, and then the carbon goes back. And so it all kind of cycles through. So the carbon that you just ate very easily could have been the same carbon molecule that made up a dinosaur. There is that likelihood, because those nutrients always cycle. We do not create or destroy matter. So that carbon has been around since the formation of the earth, and just keeps moving through it different places. So we are going to stop right here for part 1. Here comes some quiz questions. So pay attention And you can go back and, oh, what did I just do? And you can go back and rewatch this video if you need to.